The bell over the cafe door chimed, but I barely noticed. I was too busy watching her, sitting alone at the corner table with her coffee cooling in a chipped mug. She folded her napkin slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if she were trying to make a small order out of nothing. I wondered if anyone ever noticed the way she did things, these tiny gestures that weren't really gestures at all. I cleared my throat, pretending to glance at the pastries behind the glass. "Hey," I said, when she finally looked up, eyes flicking toward mine with a faint, polite smile. "You come here a lot?" She paused, the words hovering on the edge of her lips. "Sometimes," she said finally, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. There was a hesitation there, like she was deciding how much of herself to show. "I like the quiet mornings." I nodded, though I had no real idea what to say next. Instead, I watched her stir her coffee, fingers brushing the spoon against the mug's rim in a rhythm that felt like a secret. I remembered her order from last week, a latte with just a touch of cinnamon, and the memory made me smile. She noticed, or maybe she just read it in my expression. "You remembered," she said softly. "Yeah," I said a little too quickly. "It's easy to remember things about you." She laughed then, a short, soft sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked down at the table, fingers curling around her cup, as if she was weighing whether the laugh was worth keeping. I wanted to tell her that I could stay like this forever, just watching her. But I didn't. There was a quietness between us, heavy and light at the same time. I thought about the messages I hadn't sent, the texts I had drafted and deleted more than once. About the mornings I had spent staring at my phone, waiting for something I wasn't even sure I wanted. And maybe she was like that too. Paused thoughts, hovering hands, quiet sighs in an empty apartment. "You ever feel lonely?" she asked suddenly, almost whispering, as though the words themselves were dangerous. I looked up, startled, because I hadn't expected it. "Yeah," I said, but it sounded flat. "I think I do." Her gaze lingered on me for a moment longer. Then she tucked her hands under her chin and let her eyes drift toward the window. Outside, the sun slanted through the blinds and caught the dust in the air. I watched the way her eyes softened, and I realized something strange, something unsettling. It was the first time I'd admitted it to someone, and the first time I'd noticed that I wasn't just lonely in the abstract. I was lonely with her. The conversation moved on, or maybe it stopped altogether, but neither of us noticed. I scribbled something on a napkin, a joke that wasn't really a joke, and she smiled at it faintly before folding it into her purse. When she stood, ready to leave, I hesitated. The moment stretched long enough that I thought I might actually say something I'd been holding back. Then her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, fingers trembling slightly. I didn't ask. I just watched her step toward the door, the afternoon sun catching her hair in streaks of gold, and realized I wanted her to turn around, to stay a little longer. And as she walked past, a text popped up on her screen, a name I didn't recognize, and I thought, maybe she ran into her again a few days later, this time outside the small grocery near her building. She was carrying 2 bags, one noticeably heavier than the other, and before I could offer, she waved me off with a half smile. "Go ahead," she said, though I could see her brow crease under the effort. I grabbed one anyway. She let me. It felt strange, the weight of the bag in my hand. Not heavy, exactly, but like it was filled with something I shouldn't hold. As we walked, she told me about a recipe she'd been trying for her daughter, something she hadn't gotten right in years. I nodded along, but mostly I listened to the way her voice softened when she said her daughter's name. She didn't linger, didn't look for praise, and maybe that's why it mattered to me. The simple fact that she shared it at all felt like a small crossing of lines I shouldn't notice. At the cafe afterward, she ordered tea. I watched her wrap her hands around the warm cup, thumbs brushing the ceramic, and felt a pang I didn't understand. The words I had rehearsed stayed behind my teeth. I wanted to ask if she ever regretted the life she had chosen, if she ever felt the quiet nights more than the loud ones. Instead, I said nothing, just let the silence stretch between us. It wasn't awkward. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a shared space where neither of us had to explain ourselves. At one point, her eyes flicked to mine, then away, and I caught her hesitating. I imagined all the things she might be thinking, how odd it would be for someone her daughter's age to notice these small details, to care about them. How strange it would feel to be wanted in ways that weren't simple or safe. I imagined the risks she'd weigh silently, the social rules, the judgments. I stirred my tea, watching the swirl, and wondered if she noticed me imagining her imagining me. Maybe she did. Maybe she knew the weight of the unspoken and carried it quietly in the tilt of her head, the pause in her smile. When we left the cafe, a few drops of rain had started, just enough to dampen our sleeves. She laughed softly, a sound that made the tension in my chest tighten and loosen at the same time. I offered my jacket, though I knew it wasn't necessary, and she hesitated before draping it over her shoulders. Her hand brushed mine, a fleeting contact, and I felt it linger longer in memory than in reality. We walked a few steps more before she stopped. "Thanks," she said, voice barely above the rain. Not for the jacket, not for the company, but for the unspoken acknowledgement. I didn't answer, just nodded, and for a moment, I felt like we had said everything that mattered without a single word. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. He's lonely, but maybe not for the same reasons I am. She was on the balcony when I arrived, watering the plants that leaned lazily toward the sun. I hesitated at the doorframe, the smell of wet earth and sunlight filling the quiet space. She didn't look up at first. Her focus was on the leaves, the curve of her fingers, the tilt of her head. "Hey," I said softly. She blinked, then smiled, small and careful, like she was testing me. "Oh, hi. Didn't hear you come in." I stepped closer, just a little, and she stiffened almost imperceptibly. My stomach tightened. There was something there, something unsaid, like a line drawn in chalk that either of us could erase or cross. "I brought the book you wanted." I held it out, but she didn't take it right away. Fingers hovered over the cover, then pulled back, like she was weighing whether it mattered enough to touch. "Thanks," she murmured. Her eyes lingered on mine, then flicked away, toward the street below. She sighed softly. "Sometimes I forget how complicated things get, even small things." I nodded, because I knew. I knew without her having to say it. Complicated meant age, boundaries, someone noticing, someone judging. The weight of it made my chest tight, the kind of tight that doesn't leave you even in quiet moments. We sat down on the balcony chairs, just inches apart. Rain had started again, a soft drumming on the roof. I could hear her fingers brushing against the edge of the book. I wanted to reach out, trace the line of her hand, but my own hands were awkward, resting limply on my knees. "You ever feel like some things are almost meant to happen, but not quite?" she asked, voice low. Her gaze caught mine, then fell. "Like you're on the edge, but the edge keeps moving." I didn't answer. I wanted to. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say everything, but words would have ruined it, made it too loud. Instead, I just leaned. Slightly forward. She leaned slightly back. Almost. The buzzer rang inside the building. Her daughter's friend, or a delivery, or maybe someone checking in. She jumped slightly, the spell breaking. Her hand slipped from the book to the railing. "I should get that," she said, standing, brushing wet hair from her forehead. I felt the air shift, the moment tilting, a near crossing that hadn't quite touched down. Before she turned completely, I reached out, just enough for my fingers to almost graze hers. She stopped, hand frozen midair. Our eyes met again, and I thought, maybe for the first time, that she knew exactly what I wanted without me saying a word. Then the moment shattered as she stepped inside, pulling the door closed behind her. I stayed leaning against the balcony, the rain tapping a quiet rhythm against my heart, thinking about how close we'd been and how far away she now seemed. I found her at the park bench near the corner where the sun hit just right through the trees. She was reading, but her bag lay open beside her, a scarf peeking out. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught in my throat. "Hey," I said finally, softer than I meant. She looked up, startled, and tucked the book against her chest. "Oh, hi." There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long but doesn't need words. I noticed how her hand lingered on the scarf, the way her thumb brushed the fabric almost nervously. I thought about the text she hadn't answered, the laugh she shared last week with someone I didn't know. A pang of something sharp, jealousy, guilt, confusion, made my stomach twist. Did you always like this spot?" I asked, nodding toward the bench. She smiled faintly, shrugging. "Sometimes. Feels easier than the apartment. You can watch people without being watched." Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long, then shifted. "Do you ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else, doing something else?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her about the hours I'd spent thinking about her, imagining her, wishing she'd notice. But I didn't. Instead, I moved a little closer, careful not to crowd her, and let silence fill the space between us. Her gaze returned to the park, but I noticed the way her shoulders tensed. Maybe she felt it too. The pull, the impossible closeness, the risk of being seen. My fingers itched to reach for hers, to close the space, but I didn't. Sometimes I feel, she started, voice trailing, like I'm missing something I don't even know I wanted. Her eyes flicked up at me, searching, questioning, and I realized I understood that feeling better than she could know. I swallowed hard. I feel that too, I said. My hands curled into fists at my sides. More than I should. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let a small laugh escape, almost a sigh, almost a sound of defeat. The breeze played with her hair, and I wanted to pull her closer, just to stop the world from moving for a moment. We sat together like that for a while, watching the people, the pigeons, the leaves falling in slow circles, each of us aware of the tension without naming it. Every small sound felt loud, a distant dog barking, a stroller squeaking, her fingers brushing the edge of the bench. Then she shifted, leaning slightly toward me, eyes narrowing as if she were about to speak a confession she might regret. I leaned in too, the air between us thick with hesitation, with all the things we hadn't said. Her lips parted, and for a moment, I thought she would say it, say what she wanted, what I wanted, but instead she froze. I wanted to ask, but I didn't know the words. I just wondered, quietly, maybe for the first time, would she ever want this? Want me, enough to cross the line? I hadn't seen her in 3 days. Not at the cafe, not on the balcony, not even in the little grocery near her building. I kept my phone in my hand more than usual, hovering over messages I didn't send, staring at texts from friends I didn't feel like replying to. When I finally ran into her, it wasn't what I expected. She was leaving the building with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, phone pressed to her ear. I waited, unsure if I should say hi, but she passed without even glancing at me. Later that evening, I tried the cafe. The corner table where she always sat was empty, the chair pushed in neatly, as if she'd never been there. I ordered a coffee anyway, but my hand shook slightly when I set it down. The barista asked if I wanted the usual, and I realized I'd been coming here for her as much as the coffee. I replayed every moment in my head. The brush of fingers on the balcony, the laugh under the park trees, the almost confession we didn't make. And then I remembered her scarf, the one I saw at the park last week. Maybe she left it somewhere, or maybe it was gone now, and that thought made something hollow twist inside me. The next day, I walked past her building, and she was standing at the door with another man I didn't know. I didn't move, didn't wave, just froze, pretending to tie my shoe while my stomach turned. There was no jealousy, really, not exactly. More like a quiet fear, a realization that she could exist in a world where I wasn't invited. I wanted to knock, wanted to ask why, to understand. But my hand stayed at my side. I thought about the nights I drafted messages and deleted them. About the small truths I never said aloud. About the way her eyes looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. And I realized, maybe she hadn't meant to pull away, maybe she had. Maybe it didn't matter. Days passed. Coffee cups cooled on the table. Texts remained unsent. And I found myself walking past her balcony at night, hoping for a light, a shadow, a flicker that she might notice. Nothing. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Her chair stayed empty at the cafe. The book she had left with me weeks ago sat unopened on my desk. My phone buzzed, with notifications from everyone else, but never from her. And I wondered if she was thinking about me at all, or if the world had quietly moved on without asking permission. I imagined the reasons she didn't come back, the ex she hadn't mentioned, the responsibilities I hadn't guessed, the moments when she simply needed to be alone. I didn't know which was true, or if any of it mattered. All I knew was the empty space where she used to be, and the pause it had left in me. I found her in the kitchen of her apartment, the smell of toast and coffee hanging in the air. She didn't look up when I knocked, just continued stirring the pan with a quiet rhythm that made the space feel smaller, more personal. "Hey," I said softly, my voice uneven. She glanced up then, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, quickly hidden behind a polite smile. "Oh, you're here." I nodded, unsure if I was. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say for days, but now the words felt heavy, like they would break something fragile if I let them fall. My hands twisted in my pockets. I, I missed this. I finally said, not specifying what this meant. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was careful, measured, like we were both holding our breaths, seeing who would let go first. She hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the counter, then set the spoon down. I missed it too, she said softly, and there was a pause long enough for me to think I had imagined it. Then she added, almost as if answering a question I hadn't asked, more than I should, maybe. Her voice trembled slightly, and I realized that whatever risk she had been carrying, the fear, the restraint, the judgment of the world outside, was now sitting here, with me. My chest tightened at the weight of it. I moved a step closer, not wanting to crowd, just enough to let her know I was here, that I wasn't leaving. She didn't move back. She didn't move forward. We existed in the space between words, the small room holding more than any confession could. I was afraid, I admitted quietly. Afraid of saying something wrong, my voice faltered, of losing this. She nodded slowly, eyes softening. I was too, she whispered. Her hand hovered over the counter near mine, fingers twitching as if trying to decide whether to bridge the space. I reached out, just enough for our hands to touch lightly, and the warmth was immediate. Not dramatic, not a spark of romance, but real, human, and necessary. She let her hand rest against mine, almost reluctantly, almost by accident, but it stayed. I didn't speak. She didn't speak. The silence said everything. Then she smiled, a small, careful smile that carried years of things unsaid. Okay, she said softly, not a promise, not a declaration, just a recognition that we were both here, for a moment, choosing each other, quietly. I squeezed her hand once, barely, and let go. That was enough. More than enough. The coffee was still warm. The toast smelled of yesterday's sun. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't paused, wasn't uncertain. It was fragile, yes, but it was ours. It was 8:47 a.m. when I spotted her at the bench near the little park, the same one where we'd sat weeks ago, rain tapping against the leaves above. She had a thermos in one hand and a paper cup in the other, steam curling from the black coffee. I walked up slowly, letting the moment settle before I spoke. Morning, I said, smiling more easily than I had in a while. She looked up, eyes catching mine, and smiled back. Not a grand, cinematic smile, just a small curve of her lips that carried everything we'd been through. Morning, she said, and for a second, it felt like nothing had changed and everything had changed at once. We sat together, the thermos between us, passing the coffee like a quiet ritual. No words were needed for the memories tucked into this simple act. The park, the balcony, the cafe. We didn't speak of the pause, the near confessions, or the unsent texts. We just existed here, together, and that was enough. Do you want tea next time? She asked, fingers brushing the rim of her cup. I'd like that, I said. Simple, ordinary. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like permission, like settling into a place that wasn't rushed, that didn't demand more than what it could hold. The city woke around us, the sound of a bus, the distant laughter of a child, but we stayed on our bench. My hand found hers briefly, light, almost accidental, and she didn't pull away. The warmth lingered. I noticed the little things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the tilt of her head when she listened, the quiet rhythm of her sipping coffee. Small gestures that had once made me ache with longing now felt like a home I could inhabit. Later, we walked slowly toward the street cafe we'd both haunted, the air crisp, the sun soft on our shoulders. We didn't speak much, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable, the kind that doesn't need explanation. By the time we parted, her door closed softly behind her. I realized that the story hadn't ended with fireworks or confessions shouted into the wind. It had ended in shared routines, quiet mornings, and the simple acknowledgement that we had made it through the awkwardness, the hesitation, the near misses. I lingered at the bench a moment longer, watching the steam curl from her cup, thinking of 8:47 a.m., the thermos, the black coffee, the things only she and I would notice. There was no grand gesture, no promise, only the warmth of understanding, earned and fragile, and entirely ours. And for the first time, I let myself believe that quiet love, real, imperfect, patient, was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?